I pulled into the circular driveway of the Lake Tahoe resort, my 2008 Honda Civic sputtering like it was clearing its throat. The paint had faded from navy blue to something resembling dishwater gray, and the passenger side door still bore the dent from when I'd scraped against a parking garage pillar 3 years ago. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Around me, luxury vehicles gleamed in the mountain sun like jewels in a display case. My sister Victoria's pristine white BMW X7 sat prominently near the entrance, flanked by our parents' matching Mercedes and Audi. I turned off the engine and sat for a moment, watching steam rise from under my hood. Through the windshield, I could see them already gathered on the resort's wraparound deck. Victoria gestured dramatically with a wine glass in her hand, probably telling another story about her latest real estate conquest. My mother, Patricia, laughed at something, her perfectly styled silver hair catching the light. My father, Richard, stood with his arms crossed, surveying the lake like he owned it. They looked like they belonged in a magazine spread about successful families enjoying their well-earned luxury. I grabbed my overnight bag from the passenger seat, the zipper held together with safety pins, and stepped out. The car door groaned as it shut, and I had to slam it twice to get the latch to catch. That's when I heard it. "Oh my God, is that Natalie's car?" Victoria's voice carried across the parking area, sharp with disbelief and amusement. I thought she was joking when she said she was still driving that thing. A chorus of laughter followed, punctuated by my mother's theatrical gasp. "Honey, we offered to co-sign for a decent vehicle years ago. There's no excuse for that embarrassment." My face burned as I walked toward the resort entrance, pretending I couldn't hear them. But their voices followed me like shadows. "She's 32 years old," my father's voice boomed. "Successful people don't drive cars held together with duct tape and prayers." "It's like she enjoys being the family disappointment," Victoria added, and the group erupted in fresh laughter. I paused at the bottom of the deck stairs, my hand gripping the wooden railing. For a moment, I considered turning around, getting back in my unreliable car, and driving the 4 hours back to Denver. But something inside me, a stubborn streak I'd inherited from my grandmother Helen, kept my feet moving forward. "There she is!" my mother called out as I reached the deck, her voice switching to false cheerfulness. "We were just admiring your vintage automobile." Victoria smirked, setting down her wine glass. "Natalie, seriously, what year is that thing? The Clinton administration?" "It gets me where I need to go," I said quietly, dropping my bag beside an empty chair. "Barely," my father muttered, and my Uncle James chuckled into his beer. My cousin Amanda looked uncomfortable, shooting me an apologetic glance, but she didn't say anything. She never did when the family pack turned on someone. "We're worried about you, sweetheart," my mother continued, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd heard my entire life. "Living in that tiny apartment, driving that Jeep, working at that little tech company nobody's heard of. When are you going to get serious about your life?" "Streamline Solutions is doing well," I said, accepting a glass of water from a passing server. Victoria snorted. "Oh, please, what do you even do there? Answer phones? File papers? It's not like you're running the place." My father leaned back in his chair, studying me with the same expression he'd worn when I was 12 and had failed to make the honor roll like Victoria. "The point is, Natalie, at your age, you should be established. Look at your sister. She just closed on her third investment property. She drives a car that doesn't sound like a dying animal. She's building something. And you're just existing," my mother added, reaching over to pat my hand with mock sympathy. "It's okay to admit you need help. We've all accepted that you're not going to be the success story of the family." The words hit like physical blows, each one landing precisely where they knew it would hurt most. I'd heard variations of this speech for years, but something about the public nature of it, The way they'd waited until the entire extended family was gathered to deliver their verdict on my life made it feel different, more final. "I'm doing fine," I managed to say, though my voice sounded thin even to my own ears. "Fine isn't enough," Victoria said, swirling her wine. "Fine is what people say when they've given up, when they've accepted mediocrity." The conversation shifted to other topics, but I felt the weight of their judgment settling around me like a heavy blanket. For the rest of the afternoon, I fielded subtle digs about my appearance, my career choices, my dating life. Every success they mentioned about themselves seemed designed to highlight my failures by comparison. When dinner was served on the resort's elegant terrace, I found myself seated at the far end of the table, next to my teenage nephew, who spent the entire meal texting. Victoria held court from the center, regaling everyone with tales of her latest clients and business deals. My parents beamed with pride, asking follow-up questions and praising her acumen. "Tell them about the Henderson property," my mother urged, and Victoria launched into another story about outbidding other realtors and securing a massive commission. I picked at my salmon, listening to the familiar rhythm of family dynamics. Victoria performed, my parents applauded, and I existed in the margins, invisible except when they needed a contrast to highlight someone else's achievements. After dinner, as the group moved to the resort's lounge for drinks and continued conversation, I slipped away to my room. The space was small, but clean, with a view of the parking lot where my Honda sat among the luxury vehicles like a stray dog that had wandered into a kennel of purebreds. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone, scrolling through work emails to distract myself from the evening's humiliation. There were messages from Marcus, my business partner, about our latest client presentation, updates from our development team about the software launch we'd been preparing for months, a forwarded article about our company being mentioned in a tech industry publication as one to watch. But none of that seemed to matter in the face of my family's verdict. They saw a failure driving a broken-down car, and maybe they were right. Maybe I was fooling myself about what I'd built, about what I was capable of achieving. A knock on the door interrupted my spiral of self-doubt. I opened it to find Carmen Rodriguez, my best friend from college, standing in the hallway with a bottle of wine and a concerned expression. "Amanda texted me," she said, pushing past me into the room. "She said you looked like you wanted to disappear into the floorboards at dinner." Carmen had driven up from Sacramento to attend the reunion as my +1, though she'd arrived late due to work obligations. She took one look at my face and uncorked the wine without asking. "They were particularly brutal tonight," I admitted, accepting the glass she handed me. "They're always brutal," Carmen said, settling into the room's single chair. "The question is, why do you keep subjecting yourself to it?" I stared out the window at my car, its outline barely visible in the dim parking lot lighting. "They're my family." "Family doesn't systematically tear you down every time you're in the same room," Carmen replied. "Family doesn't use you as a cautionary tale to make themselves feel better about their choices." She was right, but acknowledging it felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to face. The idea that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had instead spent years convincing me I wasn't worthy of love at all. "You know what the worst part is?" I said, taking a sip of wine. "Part of me believes them. Part of me looks at that car and thinks they're right. I am 32 years old. I should have my life more together." Carmen set down her glass and fixed me with the stern look she'd perfected during her years as a social worker. "Natalie, do you remember what you told me 6 months ago when Streamline landed the Morrison account?" I shrugged, not following her train of thought. "You said it was the biggest contract your company had ever secured. You said it was going to change everything. You were so excited you couldn't sleep for 3 days." The memory came back slowly. The Morrison Group had been a whale of a client, a massive corporation looking to overhaul their entire digital infrastructure. Landing them had meant months of steady work and revenue that dwarfed anything Streamline Solutions had seen before. That was business, I said. This is different. No, it's not, Carmen insisted. It's all connected. You're so busy looking at what you don't have that you're ignoring what you've built. When's the last time you actually sat down and calculated what you're worth? Not just your salary, but your ownership stake in the company, your investments, everything? I couldn't remember. Since founding Streamline with Marcus 5 years ago, I'd been so focused on growth and survival that I'd never stopped to assess our actual value. We'd reinvested most of our profits back into the business, expanding our team and capabilities. My personal finances were handled by an accountant who sent me quarterly reports I barely glanced at. I don't know, I admitted. Carmen pulled out her phone and opened a banking app. Show me your accounts, all of them, right now. Carmen, I don't think... Humor me, she said firmly. If you're going to let your family convince you you're a failure, at least base it on facts instead of their perception of your car. Reluctantly, I pulled out my own phone and began logging into various accounts. My checking account, which I rarely paid attention to beyond making sure there was enough to cover monthly expenses. My savings, which had grown steadily thanks to automatic transfers I'd set up years ago and forgotten about. The investment account my accountant had opened and managed. As the numbers appeared on my screen, I felt a strange disconnect. The balances seemed too high, like someone else's finances had accidentally been linked to my login credentials. Read them out loud, Carmen said. Checking account, 43,000, I began hesitantly. Keep going. Savings, 100. And 87,000. My voice was getting quieter as the reality of the numbers sank in. And the investment account? I tapped on the portfolio summary, and the number that appeared made me blink several times to make sure I was reading it correctly. 4.7 million. Carmen leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smile. And that doesn't include your stake in Streamline, does it? I shook my head, still staring at the screen. Marcus and I had built the company together, splitting ownership 50-50. After landing the Morrison contract and several other major clients, our accountant had mentioned something about valuations and potential buyout offers, but I'd been too busy with day-to-day operations to pay attention. So, while your sister was bragging about her third investment property, Carmen said, refilling our wine glasses, you were sitting there with a net worth that probably exceeds everyone at that table combined. The realization should have felt triumphant, but instead, it left me feeling hollow. All those years of accepting their judgment, of internalizing their disappointment, of believing I was the family disappointment who couldn't get her act together. Meanwhile, I'd quietly built something they couldn't even comprehend. Why didn't I know this? I asked, more to myself than to Carmen. Because you've been so busy proving them wrong that you forgot to notice you'd already succeeded, she replied. You've been playing defense for so long that you forgot you'd already won the game. I set down my phone and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot again. My Honda still sat there, modest and unassuming among the luxury vehicles. But suddenly, it didn't look embarrassing. It looked like a choice, a conscious decision to prioritize substance over appearance. What do I do with this information? I asked. Carmen joined me at the window. That's up to you. But I'd suggest, starting by remembering that their opinion of your worth has absolutely nothing to do with your actual worth. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, processing the evening's revelations. For years, I'd allowed my family's narrative about my life to become my own internal narrative. I'd accepted their definition of success, their measurement of value, their assessment of my achievements. But the numbers on my phone told a different story entirely. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. They spoke of years of hard work, smart decisions, and steady growth. They reflected a business I'd built from nothing, relationships I'd nurtured with clients and colleagues, investments I'd made based on research and patience rather than flashy displays of wealth. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I found myself thinking about my grandmother Helen. She'd passed away 5 years ago, leaving behind a small inheritance that I'd used as seed money for Streamline Solutions. Helen had always been different from the rest of the family, quieter but more observant, less concerned with appearances and more interested in substance. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with the kind of mountain air that makes everything feel sharp and possible. I woke up with a strange sense of calm, as if something had shifted during the night. The shame and embarrassment from the previous evening had faded, replaced by something I couldn't quite name yet. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were comfortable rather than trying to impress anyone. When I came down to the resort's breakfast area, most of the family was already there, clustered around a large table near the windows overlooking the lake. Victoria was holding court again, this time describing her latest vacation plans. "The Maldives are stunning this time of year," she was saying. "Though I suppose not everyone can afford to travel internationally these days." Her eyes flicked to me as I approached with my coffee and pastry, and I saw the familiar smirk that preceded one of her targeted comments. "Natalie, you should consider a nice domestic vacation," she said sweetly. "Maybe somewhere you can drive to in that car of yours, assuming it makes it that far." The table chuckled appreciatively at her wit, but I found myself responding differently than I had the night before. Instead of shrinking or making excuses, I simply nodded. "It's gotten me through some interesting places," I said, taking a seat at the edge of the group. "Sometimes the journey matters more than how you travel." My father looked up from his newspaper. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps people stuck," he said, "settling for good enough instead of striving for excellence." "Is that what you think I do?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Settle for good enough? Honestly?" Victoria leaned forward, apparently eager to elaborate on my shortcomings. "Yes, you've always taken the easy path. That little tech job, that apartment, that car. You've never pushed yourself to achieve anything significant." I sipped my coffee, considering her words. "What would you consider significant achievement?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She gestured vaguely at herself. "Building a career, making real money, having something to show for your efforts." "Like your real estate business?" I asked. "Exactly. I've built something concrete. I have properties, clients, a reputation in the industry. I've made a name for myself." I nodded thoughtfully. "That's impressive. What kind of revenue did you generate last year, if you don't mind me asking?" Victoria's smile faltered slightly. "Well, that's personal information." "Of course," I said quickly. "I just wondered because I'm curious about different business models. Streamline had an interesting year financially speaking." My mother looked up from her fruit salad. "Sweetheart, I'm sure your little company did fine, but you don't need to pretend it compares to Victoria's success." "You're probably right," I agreed. "Different scales entirely." Victoria seemed to relax, interpreting my response as concession. "Exactly. We're talking about completely different leagues here." "Absolutely," I said. Streamline Solutions hit $8.7 million in revenue last year, but I'm sure residential real estate operates on different metrics entirely. The table went quiet. I could see my family processing the number, trying to figure out if they'd heard correctly or if I was making some kind of joke. $8.7 million, my father repeated slowly. "In revenue, yes. That's gross, obviously. Net was lower after expenses, salaries, reinvestment. But it was a good year for us." Victoria's face had gone pale. You're not serious." I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app I'd explored the night before. Carmen helped me look at the actual numbers yesterday. I'll be honest, I hadn't really been paying attention to the big picture. I was too focused on day-to-day operations. I scrolled to the investment account summary and turned the screen toward the table. The balance was clear and unambiguous, $4,732,891. This doesn't include my stake in the business itself, I continued conversationally. Marcus and I own it 50-50, and our accountant mentioned something about preliminary valuations in the 15 to 20 million range, but we haven't pursued that seriously yet. The silence stretched uncomfortably. My mother was staring at the phone screen like it might bite her. My father had set down his newspaper and was leaning forward, squinting at the numbers. This is real? He asked. As real as that BMW in the parking lot, I replied, putting my phone away. Though I admit the interface could be more user-friendly, I should probably switch to a different banking platform. Victoria finally found her voice. But you drive that car. You live in that apartment. You don't act like someone who has money. What should I act like? I asked genuinely. Should I be different somehow? You should be driving a better car, my mother exclaimed. You should be living in a proper house. You should be. Should be. Should be what? I prompted gently. She gestured helplessly, as if my failure to display wealth properly was somehow more disturbing than my lack of wealth had been. You should be showing it, Victoria said. Finally. What's the point of having money if no one knows you have it? The question hung in the air, and I found myself thinking about it seriously. I suppose I never thought the point was other people knowing. The point was having the freedom to make choices based on what I wanted rather than what I could afford. But people judge you, my father said, still looking stunned. We all judged you. We thought. You thought I was failing, I finished for him. I know. You've been very clear about that for years. The admission created another uncomfortable silence. I could see them grappling with the realization that their family narrative had been built on a fundamental misunderstanding of reality. Why didn't you tell us? My mother asked, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Tell you what? That I was doing well? I tried to. Remember when I mentioned the Morrison contract? When I talked about the expansion plans for Streamline? When I tried to explain what we were building? Victoria's face flushed. But you never said. You never mentioned numbers. You never said it was this successful. Would it have mattered? I asked. Would knowing I had money have changed how you treated me? The question seemed to hit them like a physical blow, because we all knew the answer was yes, and we all knew what that said about the nature of their love and respect. Carmen appeared at my elbow, having finished her own breakfast. Ready for the hike? She asked, though I could see her taking in the tense atmosphere at the table. Almost, I said, standing up. I just wanted to thank everyone for yesterday evening. It was illuminating. My father cleared his throat. Natalie, perhaps we should talk, privately. About what? I asked. About this misunderstanding. About how we can fix this. I looked around the table at faces that had suddenly become eager to please, anxious to repair relationships they'd been carelessly damaging for years. The same people who had dismissed my achievements now wanted to claim association with my success. There's nothing to fix, I said quietly. This is exactly who you've always been. The only thing that's changed is your perception of my value, and that's based on a number in a bank account, rather than any actual change in who I am as a person. That's not fair, Victoria protested. We're family. We love you. You love the idea of me now that you know I'm not embarrassing to claim, I replied, but loving someone shouldn't be conditional on their financial portfolio. I picked up my coffee cup and started to walk away, then paused and turned back. For what it's worth, I didn't build Streamline to prove anything to any of you. I built it because I believed in the work we were doing and the problems we were solving. The money was never the point. It was just the result of doing something. I cared about with people I respected. Carmen fell into step beside me as we walked toward the resort's hiking trails. Behind us, I could hear the murmur of intense conversation breaking out at the family table. "How do you feel?" she asked as we reached the trailhead. I considered the question seriously. Disappointed, I think, but not surprised. This is exactly what I expected them to do. And now what? I looked back toward the resort where my family was undoubtedly processing the morning's revelations and planning their approach to rebuilding their relationship with me. The thought of their sudden interest in my life, their eagerness to be associated with my success, left me feeling tired rather than vindicated. "Now I remember why I moved 4 hours away and only visit twice a year," I said. As we started up the mountain trail, I found myself thinking about the path that had led me to this moment. The years of feeling inadequate, of accepting their judgment, of believing I was somehow failing at life while they succeeded. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd achieved everything they claimed to value while being dismissed as a disappointment. But more than that, I realized that their opinion of my worth had never actually mattered. The work I did mattered. The me problems Streamline solved for our clients mattered. The team I'd built and the relationships I'd fostered mattered. The life I'd constructed based on my own values and priorities mattered. Their approval was irrelevant to any of that. The mountain air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of snow in the higher elevations. With each step up the trail, I felt the weight of their expectations and judgments falling away. By the time Carmen and I reached the first overlook, I had made a decision about how I wanted to handle the rest of the reunion. I was done trying to earn their respect. I was done apologizing for choices that had led to success they couldn't recognize. I was done accepting their definition of my worth. From now on, I would let my actions speak for themselves and stop worrying about whether they were listening. The hike took us 3 hours, winding through aspen groves and rocky outcroppings that offered breathtaking views of Lake Tahoe below. When Carmen and I returned to the resort, the atmosphere had shifted palpably. Family members who had barely acknowledged my presence the day before suddenly found reasons to approach me. My Uncle James was the first to intercept us in the lobby. "Natalie, there you are. I was hoping we could chat about your business. I've been thinking about diversifying my portfolio, and tech investments seem like the way to go these days." I nodded politely. "Streamline isn't currently seeking investors, but I could recommend some publicly traded companies if you're interested in the sector." His face fell slightly. "Oh, well, I was thinking more along the lines of getting in on the ground floor, of something promising. Family rates, you know?" "I understand," I said, though I didn't commit to anything further. Carmen squeezed my arm and excused herself to pack, leaving me to navigate the sudden surge of family interest alone. Within minutes, my cousin Amanda approached with her teenage daughter in tow. "Natalie, Bethany is starting to think about colleges, and I remembered you mentioning something about technology programs. Could you maybe talk to her about career opportunities in your field?" The irony wasn't lost on me. Yesterday, my career had been dismissed as insignificant. Today, it was suddenly worth discussing with the next generation. "Of course," I said to Bethany, who looked mortified by her mother's transparent agenda. "What are you interested in studying?" "Actually, I'm more interested in environmental science," Bethany said quietly. "But Mom thinks tech pays better." I looked at Amanda, whose smile had become strained. "Environmental science is a fantastic field with tremendous growth potential. Climate technology is one of the fastest-growing sectors in tech right now." Amanda's expression brightened. "Really? So there's money in environmental work?" "There's money in work you're passionate about and good at," I replied. "The specific field matters less than the expertise you develop." As we talked, I noticed Victoria hovering nearby, clearly waiting for an opportunity to join the conversation. When Amanda finally moved on, My sister approached with an expression I'd never seen before, something between contrition and calculation. "Natalie, I owe you an apology," she began, glancing around to make sure others could hear her. "I clearly misunderstood your situation. I had no idea you were doing so well." "What did you misunderstand?" I asked genuinely. She faltered, apparently expecting a different response. "Well, the car, the apartment. You seemed like you were struggling." "I see. So your apology is based on discovering I have money, not on recognizing that your treatment was unkind regardless of my financial situation?" Victoria's carefully constructed expression cracked slightly. "That's not... I mean, of course I wouldn't want to hurt you either way, but you have to admit, you gave us the wrong impression." "How so?" "You live like you don't have money. You act like you don't have money. How are we supposed to know?" The question revealed so much about her worldview that I almost felt sorry for her. "Victoria, what does having money look like to you?" "Well, you know, nice car, nice house, designer clothes, expensive vacations. The things that show you've made it." "And if someone chooses not to display their wealth that way?" She looked genuinely confused. "Why would someone choose that? What's the point of having money if you don't show it?" I thought about my grandmother Helen, who had lived modestly despite having enough savings to leave each of her grandchildren a substantial inheritance. She'd driven the same Buick for 15 years, not because she couldn't afford better, but because it served her needs perfectly. She'd lived in the same small house for decades, not because she was trapped there, but because she'd made it exactly what she wanted it to be. "Maybe the point isn't showing it," I said. "Maybe the point is having the freedom to make choices, without financial pressure." Victoria stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. "But people respect success. They treat you better when they know you've achieved something. Is that the kind of respect you want? Based on your bank? Balance rather than your character?" She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. I could see her struggling with concepts that challenged everything she'd built her identity around. My father chose that moment to join us, his approach more direct than the others had been. "Natalie, your mother and I have been talking, and we think we owe you an explanation for yesterday evening." "What kind of explanation?" "We were concerned about you. We thought you might be struggling financially, and we handled it poorly. We should have asked direct questions instead of making assumptions." I considered his words carefully. "What would you have done differently if you'd known about my financial situation?" "We would have been more supportive, obviously. More encouraging about your choices." "So your support is conditional on my success meeting your standards?" He frowned, clearly not expecting the conversation to take this direction. "That's not what I meant. We're proud of what you've accomplished. We just didn't realize the scope of it." "What exactly are you proud of?" The question seemed to stump him. "Well, the money, obviously. The success of your company. The fact that you've built something substantial." "Are you proud of the work itself? The problems we solve for our clients? The team I've built? The innovation we've brought to the industry?" He hesitated. "I don't really understand what your company does, to be honest." "Then what exactly are you proud of?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. I could see him grappling with the realization that his pride was entirely based on a number rather than any understanding of my actual achievements. "Maybe we could learn more about your work," he said finally. "Help us understand what you've built." "Why do you want to understand it now?" "Because it's clearly important. Because you've been successful with it." It was important yesterday, too. It was important 5 years ago when I started the company. It was important every time I tried to tell you about it and you changed the subject. My mother appeared at his side, having apparently been monitoring the conversation from a distance. "Darling, we made mistakes. We're trying to make up for them." "How?" She looked surprised by the question. "Well, We want to be more involved in your life, more supportive of your career. Maybe we could visit your office sometime, meet your colleagues. Why? To show our support, to be better. Parents. I studied their faces, seeing genuine confusion about why I wasn't jumping at their offer of belated attention. They seemed to think acknowledgement of their error was the same as correction of it. I appreciate that you recognize you were wrong, I said carefully, but I'm not sure what you're offering me now that I actually need. We're offering you our support, my father said, as if it should be obvious. Your support in what? In your success. In your business endeavors. In your life. What would that support look like specifically? They exchanged glances, clearly not having thought past the general concept of being supportive. We could help promote your business, my mother suggested. Tell our friends about your company. Do your friends need enterprise software solutions? Well, no, but word of mouth is important in business. It is, but usually within relevant networks. Your friends aren't really my target market. Victoria, who had been listening to this exchange with growing frustration, finally jumped back in. Natalie, we're trying to make things right. We're trying to be family to you. You've always been family to me, I replied. That was never in question. Then why are you being so difficult about this? The word difficult hung in the air, like a challenge. It was the same word they'd used to describe me throughout my childhood whenever I'd failed to respond to their treatment the way they expected. I'm not being difficult, I said quietly. I'm being honest. You're offering me things I don't need as compensation for years of treatment that was hurtful and dismissive. But the treatment was wrong regardless of my financial situation, and your support now doesn't undo the damage it caused. So what do you want from us? Victoria demanded. I don't want anything from you. That's what I'm trying to explain. The concept seemed to genuinely baffle them. They'd operated under the assumption that everyone wanted their approval, their acceptance, their support. The idea that I might have moved beyond needing those things was apparently incomprehensible. My phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. Packed and ready whenever you are. How's the family reconciliation going? I looked around at the faces surrounding me, confused, frustrated, slightly desperate. They wanted absolution without real change, reconciliation without genuine understanding. I think I'm going to head back to Denver, I said. But the reunion isn't over until tomorrow, my mother protested. I've gotten what I came for. Which was what? Victoria asked. I thought about it seriously. Clarity. As I walked toward the elevator to collect my things, I heard them talking in urgent whispers behind me. They were trying to figure out where they'd gone wrong in the conversation, what they'd said that had failed to achieve the reconciliation they'd expected. But they were approaching it like a negotiation that had stalled rather than a relationship that had been fundamentally damaged by years of casual cruelty. In my room, I packed quickly while Carmen waited. How did it go? She asked. About as well as expected. They want to be supportive now that they know I'm successful, but they can't understand why that feels hollow to me. Are you disappointed? I considered the question while folding my clothes. I'm disappointed, but not surprised. This is exactly who they've always been. I just finally have enough distance from their opinion to see it clearly. And how does that feel? Freeing, actually. I spent so many years trying to earn their respect and approval. Now I realize their respect isn't worth earning because it's based on the wrong criteria entirely. We loaded our bags into my Honda, which looked even more modest next to the luxury vehicles, but no longer felt embarrassing. It was simply a tool that served its purpose, like my apartment or my clothes or any other practical choice I'd made. As we pulled out of the resort parking lot, I saw several family members watching from the deck. Part of me expected to feel guilty about leaving early, about not giving them the reconciliation they wanted. But instead, I felt calm. The drive, Back to Denver gave me time to process the weekend's events. Carmen dozed in the passenger seat while I navigated mountain highways, thinking about the strange experience of having my family's entire perception of me shift overnight based on a single piece of information. It had been a masterclass in conditional love, or what passed for love in my family. Their affection and respect were directly tied to their assessment of my value, which was based entirely on external markers of success. But it had also been clarifying in ways I hadn't expected. Seeing their reaction to my financial success had shown me how little they actually knew about me as a person. They'd been so focused on judging my choices that they'd never bothered to understand my motivations, my values, or my goals. The money was real, but it wasn't who I was. It was simply the result of work I found meaningful, done with people I respected, in service of problems I wanted to solve. The fact that it had generated wealth was secondary to the satisfaction I got from the work itself. My family couldn't understand that distinction because they'd built their entire identity around accumulation and display of wealth. They measured their worth by their possessions and expected others to do the same. But I'd learned something, different from my grandmother Helen, who had lived comfortably but modestly, who had found joy in simple pleasures and meaningful relationships rather than status symbols. She'd taught me that true security came from knowing yourself and living according to your own values, not from external validation or material display. As we crested the final mountain pass and began the descent toward Denver, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For years, I'd carried the burden of their disappointment, their assessment of my failures, their conviction that I was somehow not living up to my potential. But their assessment had been based on incomplete information and flawed criteria. They'd judged my success by their standards rather than my own, and found me wanting because I didn't share their priorities. Now I could see clearly that their judgment said more about them than it did about me. Their values weren't my values. Their definition of success wasn't my definition. Their approval wasn't necessary for my happiness or self-worth. Carmen stirred as we reached the outskirts of the city. Almost home? Almost home, I confirmed. Any regrets about leaving early? I thought about it seriously. No, I got what I needed from the weekend. Which was? The realization that I don't need anything from them anymore. She smiled. That's a good place to be. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I looked up at my modest building with fresh eyes. It wasn't prestigious or impressive, but it was mine. I'd chosen it because it met my needs, not because it would impress anyone else. The same was true of my car, my clothes, my lifestyle choices. They reflected my priorities and values, not my bank balance or anyone else's expectations. For the first time in years, I felt completely comfortable with my choices. Not because they were right for everyone, but because they were right for me. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Hope the family reunion went well. Ready to talk. About the Peterson proposal on Monday. I smiled as I typed back. Ready. It's going to be a good week. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. Monday morning arrived with the crisp autumn air that made Denver feel alive, with possibility. I drove my Honda to the Streamline Solutions office, a converted warehouse in Boulder's tech district that we'd transformed into something that felt more like a creative studio than a traditional corporate environment. The exposed brick walls were covered with whiteboards filled with code snippets and project timelines, and the open floor plan buzzed with the productive energy of a team that genuinely enjoyed working together. Marcus was already at his desk when I arrived, surrounded by printouts and coffee cups. He looked up as I approached, his dark eyes bright with the kind of enthusiasm that had made him such a perfect business partner 5 years ago. How was the family thing? He asked, though something in my expression must have warned him it wasn't a simple question. Illuminating, I said, settling into my chair. Tell me about the Peterson proposal. Marcus studied my face for a moment, clearly, recognizing my desire to focus on work rather than dissect personal drama. It was one of the things I appreciated most about our partnership. We both understood when to push and when to respect boundaries. Peterson Industries wants to overhaul their entire customer management system, he said, pulling up files on his laptop. They're talking about a 3-year contract, potentially worth $12 million if we handle it right. I felt my pulse quicken. Peterson Industries was exactly the kind of established corporation that could validate Streamline's position in the market while providing the steady revenue stream we needed for our next phase of growth. What's their timeline? They want a preliminary proposal by Friday and a full presentation the following week. It's aggressive, but doable if we can get the whole team focused on it. As we dove into the details of the Peterson project, I felt myself settling back into the rhythm that had sustained me through 5 years of building this company. The work was complex and challenging, requiring us to understand not just the technical requirements, but the human dynamics of how Peterson's employees actually use their current systems. Over the next few hours, our developers Jennifer and Kyle joined the discussion, bringing their insights about database architecture and user interface design. Our newest hire, Sarah, contributed ideas about integration protocols that would make the transition smoother for Peterson's existing staff. This was what I loved about Streamline, the collaborative process of solving complex problems with people who brought different strengths to the table. It was the opposite of my family's competitive dynamic, where success seemed to require diminishing someone else's achievements. Around noon, my phone started buzzing with texts, first from my mother. "Natalie, we didn't finish our conversation yesterday. Could we schedule a call this week?" Then Victoria. "I've been thinking about what you said at the resort. Maybe we could grab lunch and talk through some things?" Then my father. "Your mother mentioned you left early. I hope we didn't say anything to upset you. Could we discuss this when you have time?" I showed the messages to Marcus, who raised an eyebrow. "That's a lot of sudden family interest. What happened at this reunion?" "They found out about the money." Ah. Marcus had known me long enough to understand the implications immediately. "And now they want to be supportive?" "Something like that. How do you feel about it?" I considered the question while watching Jennifer and Kyle debate database optimization strategies across the room. Mostly tired. It's exhausting to have relationships that shift based on external circumstances. Marcus nodded. "One of the advantages of choosing your own family," he said, gesturing toward our team. "The people here respect you for your work, not your portfolio." He was right. In the 5 years we'd been building Streamline together, Marcus had never once asked about my personal finances or judged my lifestyle choices. He cared about my contributions to the company, my problem-solving abilities, and my reliability as a partner. The same was true for the rest of our team. As the week progressed, I threw myself into the Peterson proposal with an intensity that surprised even me. Working 16-hour days felt better than dealing with the barrage of family communications that continued to flood my phone. Victoria called twice, leaving voicemails about wanting to clear the air and rebuild our relationship. My mother sent increasingly elaborate text messages about family dinners and heart-to-heart conversations. My father forwarded business articles he thought might interest me, apparently trying to demonstrate his newfound respect for my professional expertise. But their timing felt calculated rather than genuine, tied directly to their discovery of my financial success rather than any organic desire to improve our relationships. By Thursday, we had a solid draft of the Peterson proposal, and I finally felt ready to deal with my family's persistence. I called Victoria back during my lunch break, stepping out onto the office's rooftop deck for privacy. "Natalie, I'm so glad you called back. I was starting to worry you were avoiding us." "I've been working on a major project. What did you want to discuss?" "Well, I've been thinking about everything that happened at the reunion, and I realize I owe you a real apology. Not just for the car comments, but for years of not taking your career seriously. I waited for her to continue, curious about where this was heading. I was wondering if maybe we could start over. Maybe I could learn more about your business, understand what you do. I've been reading about the tech industry, and it's fascinating. What specifically interests you about it? The innovation? The growth potential? The way technology is changing everything? I had no idea there were so many opportunities in the field. Her response felt rehearsed, like she'd been researching talking points rather than developing genuine curiosity. Victoria, what do you actually want? The directness of the question seemed to catch her off guard. I want us to have a better relationship. I want to be a supportive sister. What would that look like? Well, maybe I could help promote Streamline to my network. I know a lot of business owners who might need your services. Do any of them need enterprise software solutions? I'm not sure exactly what that means, but business is business, right? Networking is always valuable. I found myself smiling despite my frustration. Victoria was trying to be helpful, but she was approaching it like every other transaction in her life. What could she offer me that might benefit her in return? I appreciate the thought, I said carefully, but Streamline's client base is pretty specialized. We work with large corporations that need custom database and workflow solutions. Oh, well, maybe there are other ways I could help. Maybe I could invest in the company? And there it was, the real reason for her sudden interest. Victoria wasn't trying to repair our relationship. She was trying to position herself to profit from my success. We're not seeking investors right now, I said. But if you ever do expand, you'd consider family first, right? I mean, it would be nice to keep the success in the family. Victoria, do you hear yourself? What do you mean? A week ago, you were mocking my career. Now you want to invest in it. Your support is entirely contingent on potential financial benefit to yourself. That's not... I mean, of course I want what's best for both of us. Isn't that what family does? Is it? Because what's best for me might not involve what's best for you financially. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long, enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. I don't understand why you're being so hostile, Victoria said finally. I'm trying to make up for past mistakes. By trying to profit from my success? That's not what this is about. Then what is it about? It's about family. It's about being there for each other. Where were you when I was struggling to get Streamline off the ground? Where were you when I was working 18-hour days and living on ramen noodles because every penny went back into the business? Where were you when I needed emotional support or encouragement or just someone to believe in what I was building? I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You didn't care enough to understand what I was working toward. But now that it's successful, you want to be part of it. The conversation ended shortly after that, with Victoria promising to call back when I was in a better mood. But I wasn't in a bad mood. I was clear-headed. Perhaps for the first time in years when it came to my family dynamics. That evening, I stayed late at the office to put the finishing touches on the Peterson proposal. The building was quiet, except for the hum of servers and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. I found the solitude peaceful, a stark contrast to the emotional turbulence of the past week. Around 9 o'clock, Marcus emerged from his office with 2 cups of coffee and settled into the chair across from my desk. Burning the midnight oil? Just wanted to make sure everything was perfect for tomorrow's presentation. He handed me one of the cups and leaned back in his chair. You know, in 5 years of working together, I've never seen you this driven by a single project. What's really going on? I sipped the coffee, considering how much to share. Marcus. And I had always maintained a professional relationship. But there was genuine trust between us that had developed through countless late nights and challenging problems. My family's sudden interest in my success has me thinking about what really matters, I said finally. This work matters. This team matters. The problems we solve for our clients matter. The relationships built on merit and mutual respect matter. And your family doesn't fall into that category? My family's interest is conditional. They care about me now because they've reassessed my value based on external markers. But the work itself, the satisfaction I get from it, the pride I take in what we've built together, none of that changed when they found out about the money. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I've seen this happen to other entrepreneurs. Success changes how people treat you, but it doesn't change who you are or what made you successful in the first place. Exactly. And I think I'm realizing that the approval I spent years trying to earn from them isn't actually worth having because it's based on the wrong criteria. So, what are you going to do about it? Focus on what actually matters. Keep building something meaningful with people who understand the value of the work itself. Friday's presentation to Peterson Industries went flawlessly. Our team had prepared thoroughly, anticipating questions and developing solutions that addressed not just the technical requirements, but the human factors that would determine the project's success. The Peterson executives were impressed with our approach, particularly our emphasis on change management and user training. Too many technology implementations failed because companies focused on the technical aspects while ignoring the human challenges of adapting to new systems. When could you start? Asked Margaret Peterson, the company's chief operating officer. We could begin the initial analysis phase within 2 weeks, Marcus replied. Full implementation would start after we complete the discovery process and refine the project timeline. And the budget? I handled this part, walking them through our cost structure and explaining how our phased approach would allow them to see results before committing to the full project scope. The total investment would be $2 million over 3 years, with the majority of the costs front-loaded in year 1. The room was quiet as they absorbed the numbers. It was a significant investment, but I could see them recognizing the value proposition. We'll need to discuss this internally and get back to you by early next week, Margaret said. But I have to say, this is the most comprehensive proposal we've received. As we packed up our materials and prepared to leave, I felt the familiar satisfaction that came from doing work I was genuinely proud of. Win or lose, we'd presented our best effort and demonstrated the expertise we'd spent years developing. That afternoon, my phone rang with a call from my mother. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Natalie, darling, I hope you're not still upset about the reunion. I wanted to invite you to dinner this weekend. Just family. We could cook your favorite meal and have a proper conversation. What kind of conversation? About us. About how we can be better. Parents to you. About how we can support your success going forward. Mom, can I ask you something honestly? Of course, sweetheart. If I were still driving that Honda and living in my small apartment, but you knew nothing about my financial situation, would you be calling to invite me to dinner and talk about being better parents? The silence stretched long enough to answer the question. That's not a fair comparison, she said finally. We know more about your situation now. We can be more helpful. But would you be trying to repair our relationship if you still thought I was unsuccessful? Natalie, why are you asking these hypothetical questions? We're trying to move forward, not relitigate the past. Because the past is what created the present. And I need to understand whether your interest in moving forward is about genuine change or about managing your relationship with someone you now perceive as successful. You're being very difficult about this. There was that word again, difficult, the label they applied whenever I failed to respond to their overtures the way they expected. I'm being honest about this. There's a difference. Well, the dinner invitation stands if you change your mind. After she hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the Boulder foothills, thinking about the strange parallel between my family's sudden interest and the business world I navigated every day. In business, relationships often shifted based on perceived value, and mutual benefit. But the best business relationships were built on trust, competence, and shared goals, factors that remained consistent regardless of external circumstances. My family was treating our relationship like a business transaction, recalibrating their investment based on updated information about my value. But family relationships weren't supposed to work that way. They were supposed to be based on unconditional love and support, not contingent approval based on performance metrics. As the sun set behind the mountains, I made a decision that felt both difficult and liberating. I wasn't going to spend any more energy trying to educate them about why their conditional support felt hollow. I wasn't going to waste time explaining why their sudden interest was hurtful rather than healing. Instead, I was going to focus on the relationships and work that brought genuine satisfaction to my life. I was going to continue building Streamline with people who valued collaboration over competition. I was going to invest my emotional energy in connections based on mutual respect rather than conditional approval. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Great job on the Peterson presentation today. Drinks with the team to celebrate?" I smiled as I typed back, "Absolutely. See you in 20 minutes." As I gathered my things and prepared to join my colleagues, my chosen family, for an evening of celebrating work we were genuinely proud of, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. I'd finally stopped trying to earn something that wasn't worth having and started appreciating what I'd already built. 3 weeks after the Peterson presentation, everything changed. I was reviewing quarterly financial reports when Marcus burst into my office with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of excitement and disbelief that made him look like he'd just witnessed something impossible. "Natalie, you need to sit down for this," he said, clutching his phone with white knuckles. "I am sitting down. What's going on?" "Peterson Industries just called. They're accepting our proposal, but that's not the big news." He paused, seemingly struggling to find the right words. "They want to acquire Streamline Solutions." The words hung in the air like a question I wasn't sure I'd heard correctly. "What do you mean, acquire?" "Buy us out, complete acquisition. They want to bring our entire operation in-house as their dedicated technology division." Marcus sat down, heavily in the chair across from my desk. "Natalie, they're offering $47 million. The number seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the office. $47 million. For the company we'd built from nothing in a converted warehouse, fueled by late nights and determination and the conviction that we could solve problems better than the established players in the market. They want to keep the entire team," Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength as he processed the reality of the offer. "Same positions, better benefits, and they're offering retention bonuses to everyone. They essentially want to buy our expertise and our approach, not just our client list." I stared at him, trying to wrap my mind around what this meant. "When do they need an answer?" "They want to meet next week to discuss terms. But Natalie, this isn't just about the money." Margaret Peterson said something interesting when she called. She said they've never seen a technology team that understood the human side of implementation the way we do. They want to scale that approach across all their divisions. The irony wasn't lost on me. We'd built our success on understanding that technology alone wasn't enough, that real solutions required understanding how people actually worked, what they needed, and how to make change manageable rather than traumatic. Now Peterson wanted to buy that understanding and apply it throughout their organization. "How do you feel about it?" I asked Marcus. "Honestly, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. This could set us up for life, but it also means giving up control of something we've built together." I understood exactly what he meant. Streamline wasn't just a business to us. It was the tangible result of years of shared vision and collaborative effort. Selling it would mean financial security beyond anything we'd imagined. but it would also mean letting go of the independence and creative control that had made the work so satisfying. What does the team think? I haven't told them. Yet. I wanted to talk to you first. We spent the next hour discussing the implications, the opportunities, and the risks. By the time we called Jennifer, Kyle, and Sarah into the conference room, we decided to at least explore the offer seriously. The team's reaction was a mixture of excitement and apprehension similar to our own. Jennifer, who'd been with us for 3 years, asked the question that was probably on everyone's mind. Would we still be doing the same kind of work? According to Peterson, yes, Marcus replied. They want to expand our approach to other divisions within their company. Instead of working with external clients, we'd be solving internal challenges for a Fortune 500 corporation. That could be incredibly fulfilling, Sarah said. The scale of impact we could have within a larger organization might be even greater than what we're achieving now. Kyle, ever practical, focused on the financial implications. What kind of retention packages are they offering? We'll know more after next week's meeting, I said. But the initial conversation suggests they understand they're buying expertise, not just assets. They want to keep everyone happy and productive. That evening, I drove home through Denver's evening traffic, my mind churning with possibilities and concerns. The Honda felt even more modest than usual, but now it felt like a choice rather than a limitation. With my share of a $47 million sale, I could buy any car I wanted, any house I wanted, any lifestyle I wanted. But what did I actually want? My phone rang as I pulled into my apartment complex. The caller ID showed my mother's number, and for the first time in weeks, I answered without hesitation. Hi, Mom. Natalie, I'm so glad you picked up. I was beginning to think you were avoiding our calls permanently. I've been busy with work. What's going on? Well, I was wondering if you'd reconsider our dinner invitation. Your father and I have been talking, and we realize we may have handled things poorly at the reunion. What do you mean? We may have been too focused on surface appearances instead of understanding what you've actually accomplished. We'd like to learn more about your work, about what you've built. The timing felt suspicious, but I found myself curious about their motivations. What brought about this change of perspective? Victoria mentioned that you have a very successful business, and we realized we've never really understood what you do. We thought perhaps we could take you to dinner and you could explain it to us. There it was again, their interest contingent on external validation of my success. But this time, instead of feeling hurt or frustrated, I felt something closer to pity. They were so trapped in their own value system that they couldn't see the damage it was causing to their relationships. Actually, Mom, that might be good timing. I may have some interesting news to share. Oh, wonderful. What kind of news? I'd rather discuss it in person. When were you thinking of having dinner? This weekend? We could make reservations. Somewhere nice. Why don't you come to my apartment instead? I'll cook. The suggestion seemed to surprise her. Your apartment? Are you sure? We could go somewhere more appropriate. I'm sure. Saturday evening work for you and Dad. After we made the arrangements and hung up, I sat in my car for a few minutes, thinking about what I wanted to accomplish with this dinner. Part of me wanted to tell them about the Peterson offer just to see their reaction, to watch their faces when they realized the scale of what I'd built. But that impulse felt petty and ultimately unsatisfying. What I really wanted was to understand whether they were capable of genuine change, or whether their conditional love was so deeply ingrained that it couldn't be overcome. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of Denver weather that made indoor activities feel cozy rather than confining. I spent the morning cleaning my modest apartment and preparing dinner. Nothing fancy, just the kind of meal I enjoyed making and eating. My parents arrived precisely on time, my father carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. They looked around my living space with expressions that suggested they were seeing it clearly for the first time. "This is quite cozy," my mother said, though her tone suggested she meant something else entirely. "It suits my needs," I replied, taking their coats. "Can I get you something to drink?" As we settled in the living room with glasses of wine, I could see them taking inventory of my possessions, trying to reconcile my modest lifestyle with what they now knew about my financial situation. "Natalie," my father began, "your mother, and I want to apologize for our behavior at the reunion. We made assumptions that were unfair and hurtful." "What assumptions?" "We assumed that because you lived modestly, you weren't successful. We let appearances overshadow substance. And now we understand that success can take many forms. That you've built something significant even if it doesn't look like what we expected success to look like." I appreciated the effort, but something about the phrasing bothered me. What if I hadn't built something significant? What if I were just a regular employee at a small company, living within my means and finding satisfaction in simple things? Would that have been worthy of respect? The question seemed to catch them off guard. They exchanged glances, clearly not having considered this possibility. "Of course you'd be worthy of respect," my mother said carefully. "But ambition is important. Growth is important. We want you to reach your full potential. And who decides what my full potential is? Well, you do, obviously. But parents naturally want their children to achieve as much as possible. Even if achievement comes at the cost of happiness or personal values." My father leaned forward in his chair. "Natalie, what are you getting at? I'm trying to understand whether your apology is about recognizing that you hurt me or about adjusting your behavior now that you've reassessed my value." The bluntness of the question created an uncomfortable silence. I could see them struggling with concepts they'd never been forced to examine before. "Both," my mother said finally. "We hurt you and we're sorry. But we also want to be better parents going forward." "What would being better parents look like?" "Supporting your choices, being proud of your accomplishments, including you more in family discussions." "And if my choices don't align with your definition of success?" "We'd try to be more understanding." The word "try" hung in the air, suggesting that acceptance would be an ongoing struggle rather than a fundamental shift in perspective. Over dinner, I told them about the Peterson acquisition offer. Their reaction was exactly what I'd expected: astonishment followed by effusive praise for my business acumen and vision. $47 million, my father repeated several times, as if saying the number would help him process it. "Natalie, do you realize what this means?" "It means I'll have more financial options," I said. "But it doesn't change who I am or what matters to me." "Of course it changes things," my mother said. "This kind of success opens doors, creates opportunities, changes how people see you." "Is that important? How people see me?" "It's not everything, but it matters. Respect matters. Influence matters." I looked around my small apartment, thinking about the life I'd built here, the work I'd done at my modest desk, the quiet evenings I'd spent reading or thinking or simply being content with my own company, the relationships I'd built with my team, based on mutual respect and shared goals rather than external validation. What if I told you I was thinking about turning down the offer? The question clearly shocked them. My father set down his wine glass with enough force to make it clink against the table. "Why on earth would you do that?" "Because I'm not sure selling the company is the right decision for me or for my team. Because money alone isn't enough to make a choice that significant." "But it's $47 million, my mother said, as if I might have forgotten the number. "I understand the financial implications, but I also have to consider what I'd be giving up. The independence, the creative control, the satisfaction of building something from scratch. You could build something else with that kind of capital," my father argued. "You could start 10 companies." Could I? Or would I spend the rest of my life trying to recapture what I'd sold? They looked at me like I'd announced my intention to join a monastery. The idea that someone might turn down such a substantial financial opportunity was apparently incomprehensible to them. Natalie, my mother said carefully, I think you should discuss this decision with financial advisors, with people who understand the long-term implications. I have been. I've also been discussing it with the people who matter most, my business partner and my team. But surely objective professionals. My team are professionals. They're also the people who helped build what Peterson wants to buy. Their perspective matters more than that of strangers who don't understand what we've created. The conversation continued for another hour, with my parents alternating between trying to convince me to accept the offer and trying to understand my reservations. By the time they left, I could see that they were genuinely confused by my approach to the decision. Promise me you'll think carefully about this, my mother said as she hugged me goodbye. Opportunities like this don't come along often. I promise I'll make the decision that's right for me and for the people I work with. And you'll consider the financial implications? Of course, but I'll also consider everything else that matters. After they left, I sat in my living room thinking about the evening's conversation. They'd tried to be supportive, but their support was still conditional on my making choices they could understand and approve of. The idea that I might prioritize factors other than financial gain was apparently as foreign to them as my modest lifestyle had been. But the conversation had clarified something important for me. Their approval still didn't matter as much as my own sense of what was right. Whether I accepted or declined the Peterson offer, I needed to base the decision on my own values and priorities, not on what would impress my family or anyone else. The following Monday, Marcus and I met with the Peterson team to discuss the acquisition terms in detail. Margaret Peterson and her colleagues had done their homework, presenting a comprehensive package that addressed not just the financial aspects, but the cultural integration challenges that often derailed corporate acquisitions. We want Streamline to remain Streamline, Margaret explained. We're not looking to absorb you into our existing IT department. We want to create a new division based on your approach to technology implementation. What kind of autonomy would we have? Marcus asked. Significant autonomy in terms of methodology and project management. You'd report to me as COO, but you'd have full authority over your team and your processes. The terms were generous, the retention packages substantial, and the long-term opportunities genuinely exciting. By the end of the meeting, I could see that Marcus was leaning toward accepting the offer. What do you think? He asked as we drove back to Boulder. I think it's an incredible opportunity. I also think it represents a fundamental change in what we've built. Change isn't necessarily bad. No, it's not. But it's important to understand what we'd be gaining and what we'd be losing. What do you think we'd be losing? I thought about it carefully. The scrappy independence that got us here. The ability to take risks without corporate oversight. The satisfaction of building something entirely our own. And what would we be gaining? Financial security, access to resources we've never had, the ability to impact problems at a scale we couldn't reach on our own. So it comes down to what we value more. Exactly. That evening, I called a team meeting to discuss the offer in detail. Jennifer, Kyle, and Sarah had spent the week researching Peterson Industries and thinking about the implications for their own careers. I keep coming back to the same question, Sarah said. Are we selling out or are we scaling up? What's the difference? Kyle asked. Selling out means compromising our values for money. Scaling up means finding a bigger platform for our values. Jennifer nodded. The question is whether Peterson really understands what makes us effective, or whether they think they can replicate our results with their existing corporate culture. From the meetings I've had with them, I said, I believe they genuinely understand that our approach is different, and that's what they want to buy. But there's always risk in any major change. We spent 2 hours discussing pros and cons, concerns and opportunities. By the end of the meeting, I could see that the team was cautiously optimistic about the acquisition, but they wanted assurance that we'd maintain our collaborative culture and our commitment to human-centered technology solutions. "Whatever we decide," Marcus said as the meeting concluded, "we decide together. This company belongs to all of us in different ways." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, making lists of considerations that went far beyond the financial implications. What did I want my life to look like in 5 years? What kind of work brought me the most satisfaction? What relationships and values were most important to me? The exercise reminded me of something my grandmother Helen had told me years ago. The best decisions aren't about maximizing gain. They're about staying true to who you are while adapting to new opportunities. As I looked at my lists, I realized that my decision about the Peterson offer would reveal as much about who I'd become as it would about the future I wanted to create. The decision came to me not in a moment of dramatic revelation, but during an ordinary Tuesday morning while I was reviewing code with Jennifer. We were discussing the elegant solution she'd developed for a client's data migration challenge, and I found myself thinking about how much I would miss these collaborative moments if we became part of a larger corporate structure. "Jennifer," I said, pausing our technical discussion, "can I ask you something personal?" She looked up from her laptop, curious. "Of course." "What drew you to Streamline in the first place? When you left your previous job to join us 3 years ago, what were you hoping to find?" She leaned back in her chair, considering the question seriously. "Honestly, I was tired of being just another programmer in a huge department where nobody knew my name or cared about my ideas. I wanted to work somewhere that felt like my contributions mattered, where I could see the direct impact of my work on real problems." "And have you found that here?" "Absolutely. Every project we take on, I know that my input shapes the final solution. I know that clients are getting better outcomes because of work I personally contributed to. That's not something you get in most corporate environments." Her words crystallized something I'd been struggling to articulate. Streamline had succeeded not despite its small size and independence, but because of those qualities. Our ability to respond quickly to client needs, to innovate without layers of bureaucratic approval, to maintain direct relationships between our developers and the end users of our solutions. These advantages would inevitably be compromised in a larger corporate structure, no matter how well-intentioned Peterson's promises might be. That afternoon, I called Marcus into my office and shared my conclusion. "I've been thinking about what we'd really be selling," I said. "It's not just our client list or our technical capabilities. It's our culture, our agility, our ability to care deeply about each project because we're small enough to make every project personal." Marcus nodded slowly. "I've been having similar thoughts. Peterson's offer is incredibly generous, but I keep wondering if we'd end up building the kind of bureaucratic technology department we originally left corporate jobs to avoid." "Exactly. And there's something else I've realized. I don't need $47 million to feel successful or secure. I need work that matters, relationships that are genuine, and the freedom to make decisions based on what I believe is right rather than what maximizes profit." "So you're thinking we should decline the offer?" "I'm thinking we should counter with a different proposal entirely." Over the next few days, Marcus and I developed an alternative arrangement to present to Peterson Industries. Instead of acquiring Streamline outright, we proposed a long-term partnership where we would remain an independent company while taking on Peterson as our primary client. They would get the dedicated technology expertise they wanted, and we would maintain the independence that made our work meaningful. "It's a smaller financial opportunity," I explained to the team when we presented our thinking, "but it preserves what makes Streamline special while still providing growth and stability." Sarah was the first to respond. "I'd rather make less." Money doing work I love than make more money in a job that feels generic. Kyle and Jennifer agreed, though Jennifer raised a practical concern. Will Peterson be interested in a partnership rather than an acquisition? There's only one way to find out, Marcus said. Margaret Peterson's initial reaction to our counter-proposal was skeptical. Partnership arrangements can be complicated, she said during our follow-up meeting. Acquisition gives us more control over outcomes and timeline. But it also eliminates the very qualities that attracted you to Streamline in the first place, I replied. Our effectiveness comes from our independence, our ability to focus intensively on specific problems without corporate distractions. An acquisition would fundamentally change our culture. You'd still have significant autonomy within our structure. With respect, Margaret, autonomy within a corporate structure is different from actual independence. We'd be making decisions based on Peterson's priorities and constraints, rather than what we believe serves our clients best. The negotiation continued for several weeks, with lawyers and accountants on both sides working through the complexities of a partnership agreement that would meet everyone's needs. Eventually, we reached a compromise that felt workable. Peterson would retain Streamline as their exclusive technology partner for the next 5 years, guaranteeing us substantial annual revenue while preserving our independence. The financial terms were far less dramatic than the acquisition offer would have been, but they provided the security and growth opportunity we needed while maintaining our core identity. When we announced the partnership to our team, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. This feels like the best of both worlds, Sarah said. Growth without selling our souls. But the most satisfying aspect of the decision wasn't professional. It was personal. I had made a major life choice based entirely on my own values and priorities, without considering what would impress my family or anyone else. For the first time in my adult life, I had trusted my own judgment completely. The timing of this realization was particularly meaningful because my family's behavior had become increasingly predictable. Once word of the Peterson partnership became public, Victoria called within hours. "Natalie, I just saw the announcement in the Business Journal. This partnership sounds incredible. You must be so excited about the growth opportunities." I'm excited, I said. It feels like the right decision for Streamline and for everyone on our team. I've been doing some research on corporate partnerships, and I think there might be ways I could help you maximize the opportunity. I know people in Peterson's industry who could provide valuable insights. Victoria, do you know what Peterson Industries actually does? There was a pause. Well, they're a large corporation. Business is business, right? They manufacture industrial equipment for mining and construction. Your network is primarily residential real estate. I'm not sure there's much overlap. Oh, well, maybe there are other ways I could support your success. I appreciate the thought, but I'm pretty satisfied with how things are developing. But surely there are always new opportunities to explore. Maybe I could help you think through expansion strategies or investment opportunities. I found myself smiling at the transparency of her agenda. Victoria, what do you actually want? I want to be a supportive sister. I want to be part of your success story. My success story doesn't need additional characters. It's complete as it is. The conversation ended awkwardly, but I felt no guilt about declining her offers of help. Her interest remained contingent on her ability to benefit from my achievements, and I no longer felt obligated to manage her feelings about that reality. My parents' response to the Peterson partnership was more complex. My father called to congratulate me, but I could hear confusion in his voice. "The partnership sounds promising," he said carefully. "But I have to ask, why didn't you take the acquisition offer? $47 million is life-changing money." "My life is already exactly what I want it to be," I replied. "More money wouldn't have improved it." "But think about the security, the opportunities, the statement. It would have made about your success." "To whom? Who am I trying to make a statement to?" The question seemed to perplex him. Well, to everyone. To the business community. To people who doubted you. Dad, the only person whose doubts about me ever mattered was me, and I stopped doubting myself a long time ago. But external validation is important too. Recognition matters. Recognition from whom? From people who judged me based on my car? From people who dismissed my work because they didn't understand it? Their opinion was irrelevant when they thought I was failing, and it's irrelevant now that they think I'm succeeding. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if he was still there. I don't understand your perspective, he said finally. I know. And that's okay. We don't have to understand each other's choices to respect them. But I want to understand. I want to be a better father. Then start by accepting that your definition of success might not be my definition of success. Start by recognizing that your approval isn't something I need to earn or maintain. That sounds like you don't want a relationship with us. I want authentic relationships based on mutual respect, not conditional relationships based on performance metrics. If you can't offer the first kind, then I don't have energy for the second kind. The conversation ended with tentative plans for another dinner, though I wasn't optimistic about their ability to fundamentally change their approach to family relationships. 6 months later, those predictions proved accurate. My family's interest in my life had waned as the novelty of my financial success wore off, and they realized I wasn't going to provide them with investment opportunities or social status enhancement. The dinner invitations became less frequent, the phone calls shorter and more perfunctory. But instead of feeling hurt by their withdrawal, I felt relieved. The pressure to earn their approval was finally gone, replaced by the satisfaction of relationships built on genuine connection rather than conditional acceptance. Carmen noticed the change when we met for lunch on a sunny Denver afternoon. You seem different, she said. More settled, somehow. I feel different. I spent so many years trying to prove myself to people whose approval wasn't worth having. Now I'm focused on work that matters and relationships that are real. Any regrets about the Peterson decision? None. The partnership is working beautifully. We're solving bigger problems than we ever could have tackled independently, but we're still streamlined. We still make decisions based on what's right. For our clients and our team, not what maximizes corporate metrics. And your family? They are who they've always been. I'm just not trying to change that anymore. Carmen raised her glass in a mock toast. To accepting reality instead of fighting it. And to building your own definition of success instead of adopting someone else's. The streamlined partnership with Peterson flourished over the following year. Our team expanded carefully, bringing in new developers who shared our commitment to human-centered technology solutions. The work became more complex and impactful, reaching thousands of Peterson employees across dozens of facilities. But the most meaningful change wasn't professional. It was the quiet confidence that came from making major life decisions based on my own values rather than external expectations. I bought a new car, not because I needed to impress anyone, but because my Honda finally needed more repairs than it was worth. I chose a reliable hybrid that reflected my priorities: practicality, environmental responsibility, and long-term value rather than status or appearance. I also bought a house, a modest craftsman bungalow in a Denver neighborhood where I could walk to coffee shops and bookstores. It wasn't impressive by my family's standards, but it felt like home in a way my apartment never had. The housewarming party I threw was small but perfect. My streamlined colleagues, Carmen and a few other close friends, neighbors I'd started to get to know. No family members attended, not because they weren't invited, but because we'd all quietly acknowledged that forced gatherings based on obligation rather than genuine desire to spend time together weren't worth the effort. During the party, Marcus pulled me aside on the back porch. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd taken the acquisition offer?" I looked out at my small backyard, where Jennifer and Kyle were debating the merits of different programming languages while Sarah told Carmen about her latest project. Sometimes, but I think I would have spent the rest of my life trying to recapture what I'd sold. Any regrets about how things worked out with your family? I regret that they couldn't love me for who I am, rather than what I achieve. But I don't regret stopping my attempts to earn something that was never actually available. That's probably the healthiest perspective. It's taken me 33 years to get here, but yes, I think it is. As the evening wound down and my guests prepared to leave, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The family reunion that had seemed so humiliating at the time had actually been a gift, a clear demonstration of my family's conditional love that freed me from the exhausting effort of trying to earn their approval. The Peterson acquisition offer had been another gift, an opportunity to choose my own values over external validation, to prioritize meaningful work over maximum profit, to build something sustainable rather than something impressive, and my modest house, my reliable car, my small but dedicated team, my quiet but satisfying life. These weren't consolation prizes for someone who couldn't achieve more. They were conscious choices made by someone who had learned to define success on her own terms. That night, after everyone had gone home and I was washing dishes in my new kitchen, I thought about a conversation I'd had with my grandmother Helen shortly before she died. She'd been talking about the choices that had shaped her life, the opportunities she'd taken, and the ones she'd declined. The secret, she'd said, isn't figuring out what other people think you should want. It's figuring out what actually makes you happy, and then having the courage to choose that, even when it looks different from what everyone else is choosing. It had taken me years to understand what she meant, but now I could see that she'd given me the most valuable inheritance possible. Not money or property, but permission to live according to my own definition of a successful life. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Saw your company mentioned in Forbes. Congrats on the partnership success. Hope you're well. I smiled as I typed back, thanks. Hope you're well too. It was a polite exchange, the kind of distant cordiality that might characterize our relationship going forward. There was no hostility in it, but no real warmth either. Just acknowledgement that we were family members who had chosen different paths and different values. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs to my bedroom, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked like someone who had found her place in the world, not because she'd conquered it or impressed it, but because she'd stopped trying to be anyone other than exactly who she was. The woman looking back at me had built a business based on solving real problems for real people. She'd chosen authentic relationships over convenient ones. She'd defined success based on satisfaction and sustainability rather than recognition and accumulation. She'd learned to value her own approval more than anyone else's. She was exactly who I'd always wanted to be, even when I didn't know that was what I wanted. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, new projects to tackle with my team, new decisions to make based on my own judgment rather than others' expectations. But tonight, I fell asleep in my modest house in my chosen neighborhood, surrounded by the quiet satisfaction of a life built deliberately rather than by accident. It wasn't the life my family had imagined for me, but it was unmistakably mine. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.